Welcome back to another Film Geek video. Today I am ranking the Purge films from my favorite to least favorite film in the franchise. So why have I chosen to talk about the Purge films? Well, it's an election year here in the United States, and let's just say things always get a little weird and crazy during an election year around here. I mean, let's just look at how things have started so far in the month of January. We have a Stanley Cup craze. People are raiding Targets trying to get their hands on Stanley Cups, specifically the Valentine's Day pink or red. We also have 10-foot tall aliens battling the Miami police at a mall, and not to mention all the people digging tunnels. There are people digging tunnels under synagogues. There's people building tunnels under their homes. What is going on with tunnels? Well, I'll tell you folks, it's just an election year here in the United States. Like I said, things can get a little weird. So I decided to sit down and watch the Purge series, because it tells the story of an alternative world, an alternative America, where in one night every year, all bets are off, all laws are lifted, and everything can happen that you want. And what's that mean? Well, murder and mayhem in the streets, of course. So you know what? I'm getting eager to find out what I like the most about this franchise myself. So it's time to get over to that series of tubes we like to call the internet, and it's time to decide what's the best and or worst of the franchise. Alright, let's get this started, shall we? Okay, so we're gonna get this started. I like to start things with my favorite and then move into my least favorite, because to be perfectly honest, I've always been much more interested in what someone's least favorite movie is. Their favorite movie almost always seems to be very similar to a lot of people's opinion, but it seems like everybody has a very different least favorite movie in a long-going franchise. So, here we go. And also, too, I would like to say that if you're watching this film, you're watching a ranking video, more than likely you've seen these films, so there are going to be spoilers discussed. I am going to also talk about endings and big plot points and things of that sort. So if you haven't seen these movies, probably a good idea to stop this video, check out all the movies in the franchise, and come back. But more than likely, you've already seen them. So let's get this started, shall we? We're going to get it going here with my favorite of the franchise, and that is Purge Election Year. I know, right? With the whole theme, election year and all that. This film, in my opinion, was a very big undertaking. I liked this movie a lot. So this is basically, well, we thought, the ending of The Purge. The way the story goes, there's a presidential candidate who wants to end the Purge. And let's just say the people in charge of the Purge, they don't like that idea. So they end up changing a few rules. Normally during the Purge, they say all political leaders and important folk are completely taken out of the Purge. They cannot be hurt whatsoever. But in this movie, because they're a little scared of this candidate, they lift that rule and say, hey, you know what? Everything's fair game this time. We want to show the American people that we're just as, equal as they are, so we can be purged too. And, well, let's just say that doesn't go too awful well for him in the end. But in the beginning of it, seems like a great idea. So needless to say, she is hunted down by various points throughout the city until she can get to the resistance force, where she gets protected, and bada bing bada boom, election is won, and we all think that the Purge ends. I really liked this story. I thought that this film did a great job not only of wrapping up the series, of honestly also being a really good standalone film in the first place. I do believe as this series went on, a lot of the horror elements did go away, except for a lot of violence. And this one, up to this point, was probably the most violent of them all. I really enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the concept of this one, and I liked the way that it just, again, felt like it could stand on its own 2 feet. It didn't need the other 2 movies. You just, go along with it at the very beginning. It explains enough for you, you get a good idea, and then boom, you can get right into it. So I think the film has good pacing, it moves along just fine. Yeah, it's my favorite one of the bunch, definitely. So that brings us to number 2, and number 2 is number 5. Number 5, The Forever Purge. Now, I like this one a lot because it feels like it's a new beginning. Now, it does seem like an ending, also just kind of ending all of the Purge movies, but at the same time, it opens it up into a completely different genre, which seems like the world of Escape from New York. So in Forever Purge, they're focusing mostly on small town in Texas. So in this Purge, everyone has their purge night. Everything goes according to plan, as I guess purges are supposed to go, except one catch. People decide, you know what? Let's just keep purging. Screw these rules. We're just gonna purge forever. And that's exactly what they do. So our main characters are trying to escape the United States down into Mexico. I thought that this was kind of a really fun little twist on how things kind of go, you know? And I like the characters, I like the story, I like the acting. I will say that I believe this is the best acted of all of the Purge films, and it also seemed like it might have had the largest budget. I like that they moved the setting to a rural area. It's not just confined to the city. It kind of gives you another idea of how the Purge has affected different parts of the United States. That is another thing I like about this movie is it kind of moves you around so you get a different understanding of how things affect people in different areas. So there we go, number 2. Moving into number 3, Purge. Number 2, The Purge Anarchy. Now, The Purge Anarchy, in my opinion, is probably where the franchise should have started, and we're getting to that. This one seems to really dive into the lore and lets you know exactly what's going on in this world. This is where we find out that there's a big government conspiracy, that the Purge really isn't as successful as they have led us to believe, and that the government likes to send in groups to start slaughtering people as much as they possibly can to make it look like this is going great. This film has a lot of really deep characters. Again, this was a pretty good acted film, not as good as the last one, but it really starts to dive into how the Purge, how the Purge affects the people in the country, mostly the blue-collar folk and down. How this Purge really affects those folk because they don't have all of the money like the rich people do to buy all the high-tech security systems and things of that sort. So they're just kind of stuck to, just living off their wits and hopefully being able to afford a couple of guns to protect themselves. So I like how this movie moved along. That brings us to my 4th favorite, and that is, okay, this is where it gets down to the funny, because obviously I'll reveal my least favorite once I pick this one. So, yep, number 4 is the prequel, and that is First Purge, right here. Now, the reason why I like this one a bit more than the first one is it feels still like it fits into all of the Purge movies that come after the first one a lot better, despite the fact that it is a prequel. Now, the reason why I don't really like this movie a whole lot, it's not that it's unwatchable or a bad movie. It's not bad. It's okay. But number one issue I have with this movie is the dialogue. The dialogue in this film is just really poorly written. I don't know why they went the route they did with some of it, and honestly, the acting in this one is not as solid as other films in the series. The film also drags a little bit, and unfortunately, a person like me, I kind of find prequels a bit on the pointless side. The way I look at it is, if you haven't told this story yet in the series, why are you telling it now? If it was able to be summed up in just a few minutes in your first movie in the series, why are we going back and seeing all of this? I mean, it gives some different levels and some depth to the film, just a little bit to the film series, but in all, it's just the same as any other prequel. It just seems like a complete and absolute cash grab, especially with the very lack of quality that I saw in the film. And again, that's a personal preference. That brings me to my final and last movie, and that is, strangely enough, the very first film in the series, The Purge. I saw this movie and I immediately didn't like it. I just didn't like this movie. I felt like it was nothing more than a generic home invasion film that had some good ideas, but some terrible execution. I almost didn't watch any of the other films in this series because I disliked this movie so much. I saw this movie after I'd seen some other home invasion films also. It's not like I saw this movie in theaters or anything like that. I saw it later on down the road, and it didn't do anything for me. It didn't scare me. It didn't fill me with suspense, and it certainly didn't make me want to see another one in the series. So that's why when the second film came out and I saw that it opened the world up a little bit, I was more intrigued. It was the world of the first movie that intrigued me. The idea that, 12 hours a year, all crime is completely legal. You can do whatever you want. That really intrigued me. I like the way that it showed that, later as the series progresses, you get to see how it, again, affects everybody. In the first film, it seems like they focus mostly on how the Purge affects the upper class, the wealthier class. You don't really get to see too much. Now, they do have the homeless person as one of the characters they bring in and see, oh, okay, so they're the most susceptible because they're out there, they can't hide, and so on and so forth. So there was some good building in this, but I don't feel like it was a really solid film. I just didn't find it all that suspenseful, scary, atmospheric, anything that you would find a horror film to be. It was something that I thought had a great concept, but the movie never delivered. Then the second film came out, and I was like, oh, now this is headed in a better direction. Despite the fact that I feel like it started to lighten up on the horror, except for in the gore category at this point. But I digress. All in all, guys, this is a fun series that it doesn't take itself too seriously, and you shouldn't take it too seriously either. It's just popcorn horror action goodness, and that's all it is. So you know what, guys, there we have it. There is my list of my favorite films from best to worst of the Purge franchise. So thank you very much for checking out the Film Geek. If you liked what you saw here today, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, and give me the old thumbs up so I know you like what you're seeing. And if there's one more thing you can do, folks, that is keep watching movies. You know I'm gonna.